Hi, I'm Ronnie Wiley, and welcome to this edition of On the Spot. To my left is Aminah, and last name?
Aminah Paden.
Paden. See, I got your first name correct. It's a last name. It's the easy one. And I got Aminah. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
much.
Me.
You're a local author, and you're not really from Connorsville. You are from Illinois. Well, you're from various places.
Yes, I actually was born in Boston, and my parents moved to Chicago, so I was raised in Chicago, and recently moved to Connorsville.
Yeah, what brought you here to Connorsville?
I don't know.
I just
came.
Nothing wrong with that. We're glad to have you here. And
Thank
you are an author, and you've written a book called Empath 3. Yes. Tell us about your book.
Okay. Empath 3 is a story about characters who have extreme empathy. And empathy is when someone can feel what another person is feeling from that person's frame of reference.
Right.
So these characters have empathy to the point where someone else's feelings or thoughts can send them into another reality. And so it's a sci-fi novel that also has a moral to the story.
Wow, wow. So when you talk about empathy, when I think of empathy, I think of like psychology. Do you have a background in psychology, or?
I don't have a background in psychology, but I do know people who are empathetic, very empathetic, and that really is the impetus for writing the book.
Yeah, so that became the kind of the inspiration for it. When you started writing the book, did you have any outline? Basically, what's your writing process?
Well, what I like to do when I write a book is to start in the end. So I think about what is the message that I would like the reader to walk away with. And I think about that, and then I write a story around that. And so I'll start by producing an outline that kind of guides me through the writing process.
So when you, with your writing process, does it include a lot of free writing, or do you, because that's what I like to do, I just sit and start writing and an idea will generate. And for me, I like to act, so I write in first person. So everything I write is character driven. Is this a plot driven story, or is it based on, it sounds like it's based on character since it's, you know, about empathy.
I think we have a little bit of both. Okay, so it is based upon main characters and in Empath 1, because it's called Empath 3 because there are actually 3 parts.
Okay, wow, okay.
So you have Empath 1, Empath 2, and Empath 3.
Wow.
So in Empath 1, we have the main character, David Pruitt, who is really working to understand his own extreme empathy. And he's traveling through a mysterious mind portal into these different experiences, not really understanding that it's happening because other people's thoughts are sending him there.
Right.
So then he meets another main character, Dr. Channels, who is a geneticist, who sort of helps him to understand what is going on in his life. But when he's in these different realities, he actually begins to help people while he's there, and he finds out that helping people actually helps him to return back home. And so that's Empath 1.
Wow. And so when you were writing Empath 1, did you know immediately that you would have an Empath 3?
I did not.
Yeah.
I wrote Empath 1, and then people were coming to me saying that they wanted to know what happened next.
Right.
And so then I started working on Empath 3 because of that, because people wanted to know what happened next.
Right, yeah.
Because I didn't even know what was going to happen next until I actually sat down to write Empath 2.
Wow. So are people wanting to know what's going to happen after Empath 3? Is there a 4 that's on the horizon?
Empath 4 is on the horizon, and I'm going to save that for when it comes out.
Absolutely. We'll have you back on when that one's out. So again, as a writer too, which I'm non-published, I have all kinds of stuff. I love the writing process. I love the idea of creating characters, backstories that you may never use. Do you write notes down before you start getting at the keyboard, or you just write and, I mean, what's your process once you are at the keyboard?
It's interesting that you should say that because I do a lot of research on the internet and read books, and sometimes I run across certain topics and I'll say, oh wow, that's interesting, let me find out more about that. And then I'll think to myself, that will work well in a novel. For instance, as I'm thinking about Empath 4, which is, of course, not written yet, but I ran across an article about a scientist who was saying that he, in terms of climate change, he didn't believe it was a real issue because he felt that as scientists we could create trees
Really?
that
Okay.
would clean the air. And I never thought about that, and that sounds kind of science fiction. I
Right.
said I could write a story around that.
Right.
So that's kind of how I'll hear things or research things. And climate change is a real issue, by the way. I don't want to, but
Right.
just in this scientist's mind, it's something that science could overcome.
Overcome. Right.
Right. And so that's science fiction. And I said that I could write a story around that. And that's kind of how I write the books.
Right.
I come up with ideas based upon, I might see something or something, and then I'll expand on it and make it bigger and broader.
So science fiction sounds like that's the genre you generally write in. Is there any other type of genre that you write in?
I do write inspirational books as well.
Oh, good.
And so initially I started out writing, I went to a conference which was an inspirational conference called the Panorama of Truth. Mm-hmm. And Iyanla Vanzant was one of the speakers there. She's a very popular writer, author. And she said, the only difference between you and I is that I wrote the book. So that's when I went home and I started writing my first book.
Wow.
And I wrote the first 7 chapters and I kind of put it aside. And I asked, at that time with my attorney, I said, would you read this for me and tell me what you think? Well, she didn't get back to me and I didn't pick the book back up. Maybe years later, she mailed the book to my house, the 7 chapters that I had given her. And she said, it was a note on it that said, you have to finish this book because it really helped me when I was dealing with the death of my father.
Oh, wow.
And so that's when I went ahead and I finished that book. And then I didn't write another book again for more than a decade.
Wow.
Wrote my second one. And then I started on the Empath series, which is really something that I enjoy writing.
When you talk about inspirational, is it inspirational sayings or is it inspirational stories that you've witnessed, that you've created, maybe fictionalized a little bit, or about your inspirational stories? What are they all about?
Well, they're actually nonfiction, and
Okay.
they're nonfiction, and they're really about my own experiences in life,
Yeah.
and how in my own spiritual journey.
Yeah.
But I wanted to write Empath 3. It's a fictional story because I wanted to reach out to everyone.
Right.
Anyone of any age can enjoy Empath 3 and look at the story and perhaps identify with the characters because we all are overcoming challenges in our lives. And it's a way to look at it in a fun way and just enjoy the story and hopefully learn something or walk away with something that would be beneficial.
So now that you're on 3, and it tends to, as the characters grow and develop and morph into their, it's like them.
Yes.
I'm sure you feel like you know them.
Yes.
You let them
definitely.
take you on it. They're writing the story now.
Right.
Is basically
Definitely.
what's happening. Describe that process when you're in that zone as a writer, when the characters are leading you to tell the story.
Oh, definitely. There have been times that I've been writing and then I'll say, well, no, this is not something that this particular character will do, or this particular character has these certain traits, So Empath 3, for instance, we see David Pruitt, who is the main character from Empath 1. He actually becomes sort of a mentor to a new generation of empaths. So Dr. Channels has globally identified certain people who have this extreme empathy gift, these young people. And she and David figure out a way to go through the mind portal to actually train these young people to be able to use their gifts.
Yeah.
And it's just a really interesting story. And so we see in Empath 3, these young people, after they have been trained with their extreme empathy gifts, actually going on a mission, sort of like Mission Impossible.
Right. Yeah, okay.
And where they're protecting global empaths from an international alliance who would seek to do them harm. So it's just an interesting story.
Wow, sounds like, again, I'm a simple writer when it comes to, mine's just character driven. And so the plot kind of revolves around the traits of the character. So I love it when people can add so much plot element to it as well. I think that's such creative genius on that. You've obviously, this is your third book with the Empath series. Has the feedback been different from the first two books for Empath 3, or has it been about the same as far as your positive feedback?
Okay, well, Empath 3 just came out.
Oh, it just came out. Okay.
It just came out. So right now I am waiting to hear feedback from people. I have spoken to a few people who have told me what they thought about Empath 3. And one of my friends, and she was saying that she really enjoyed the story. She hadn't finished it though, and she wanted to know some of the things that were coming up, right?
Like, no, I can't read it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, she was like, okay, tell me. She was like, no, don't tell me. Tell me, no,
right,
don't tell
exactly.
me.
That's how it all is. Yeah. I want to hit that fast forward button to see what's going on.
Right.
Yeah. And that right there, if you keep people, I know for me as a reader, I love that anticipation. If the author could keep me to where I am anticipating that because it opens up my mind. And as an author, and I'm sure you're aware of this, as an author, once I'm reading it, it becomes my story. So I see that David may, even though you create the image of what he looks like, I visualize it with all the characters, and that's why people always talk about, well, the book's better than the movie, because as a reader, I'm the one who's creating what they look like, and when I see the movie, it's, well, that's not what I pictured them to look like. So have you had somebody come up to you and give you kind of a different interpretation of what you wrote and thought, ooh, maybe that is a good interpretation? Not what you intended, but does that make sense?
Well, there are a couple of things in response to that question. I've had one person who said how much the book really reflected her own life.
Oh, wow.
And she said she just could not stop reading it from page to page to page because she could relate so much to the story.
Wow. But that makes you feel good.
It did. It did make me feel good. And then I had another person who said they were really into sci-fi and they were into the entire book. And one of the things that she wanted to see was, because we find out that I don't want to spoil the story.
I hear you, yeah.
I don't want to spoil the story. But we do find out that Dr. Channels has some of her own powers.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And so this person really wanted to get into the background of, she was fascinated by Dr. Channels, this particular character. And she was like, I want to know how she grew up.
Right? There you go. Yeah.
But yes, so I do have people who give me feedback on specific characters, on the plot line, and I love it.
And it sounds like an idea for, maybe I can branch off to a story of just Dr. Channels.
A story about Dr. Channels, just a whole nother book.
Yeah, exactly. So and I find that amazing. When you meet people who have read your book, or actually, let me take that back. When you are writing your book, obviously you want people to enjoy it. Do you think of, okay, who are the people that I'm targeting? And then when you're doing a book signing, are you surprised that, okay, I didn't think that you would probably like this book?
Well, what's very interesting is, because I've been around to a lot of different book signings and meeting people and shaking hands and
We're fist bumping now with the
fist bumping now, right?
Yeah.
But this young lady came up to me and she said, I read your book and it was awesome. And so that was great to hear that such a young person, she looked like she may have been in middle school, she found the book was interesting. And I actually was out with the second one, and her mother was like, she really loved your book. She was like, is this the second one? She was like, well, let me get it for her, right? But then at another book signing, an elderly man came up to me and he said, I just kept reading the book from page to page. I loved it. And then his partner who was with him, I don't know if it was his wife or whoever, but she was like, he loved your book. So it's like anyone of any age could read it and find something to identify with or like, and that makes me feel good.
Right. Oh, sure. I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. And meeting people who get what you're writing about
Definitely.
is probably something that feels good. Now, you've written many things. Do you only focus on, because I'm sure as a writer, and I know for me, I plagiarize against myself. I'll take something from this story and go, maybe I should morph it into one. Do you work on more than one project at a time, or do you just focus on one?
Okay. Well, I make my living as a writer,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
so
so you're writing all the time.
I write all the
Yeah.
time. I'm always writing for corporations,
Yeah.
nonprofits, online content. I do writing and consulting for digital marketing, and so I always have projects in queue.
Yeah.
And in terms of books, though, I try and tend to focus on one book at a time and get that book done, or at least the the draft of it done,
Right.
so that I can start working on the rework and the rewriting.
See, I think that's probably my problem is I get all these different ideas, and then I start jotting this down, and then another idea will come up for something else, and I need to really focus on just one thing. You need to teach me that discipline. After we get off the air, you need to teach me that discipline.
Well, some people work on multiple projects at a time.
I don't think I finish any of them. I mean, I've got so many float. Well, let me say, I finished a lot of them. I'm never satisfied. I'm always rewriting and going through. The revision is the greatest thing I learned in college, was revision. So I'm going through it going, well, that's too wordy. Let me change it. Or I kind of said this differently. I'm always going through, and I'm never satisfied. It's like I need to totally get some things out of my hands and let it go to an editor and go from there.
But you know what? That is a point that you make. It's an important point, because as a writer, I'm also never satisfied.
Yeah.
I'm always like, okay, no, I need to change this. I need to change that. I need to turn this around, that kind of thing. And so self-publishing actually is one of the greatest things that ever happened, because you can always make changes and then, upload those changes to
that's true.
online. So.
Yeah, I like getting into the hands of people who tell me, that's not good. I like that. I'm like, oh, that's great. Really, what's great about it? I just liked it.
Yeah, I like honest
Yeah,
feedback.
tell me why you liked it. I mean,
exactly.
I remember in college, one of my professors named T.J. Rivard, he'd always write in red. So we called it dripping your story in blood, because he'd make all these changes. And I mean, it'd be like, oh my gosh, there's so much changes at the very end. Good job. I liked it. Really? You wrote it in red.
One of my friends, I'll always ask my friends, I say, I really want your honest feedback, if you have time. And one of my friends for Empath 3, she said, okay, so I get that that the Brian Brenner, who is the nemesis in the story, was monitoring Dr. Channel's laboratory remotely, right? And she knew he was doing that. And she said, but why? Why would she allow him, why would the character allow him to monitor her laboratory? And so, I reflected on that, and I actually added that into the storyline. There was a reason why that was connecting to his research and her research. And so I take feedback to heart.
Oh, yeah. I think it's important.
And make those changes accordingly.
Yeah, I used to, when I was a kid and I'd write, and somebody would criticize something, I would take it to heart. But as I grew in college, it taught me that's important, because it's no longer mine, it's yours.
Right.
And if, again, you may come up with something completely different and still enjoy it than I intended, and that's fine. Especially any poems I write, you may take it completely different, and that's how poems are designed. So when you're sitting there writing and you're never satisfied with it, how do you finally let it go to where, okay, I got to just get it out there?
Well, you know what? On this particular story for Empath 3, I kept changing. It was actually supposed to come out last year.
Oh, okay.
And I kept changing it, and I kept changing it, and I kept changing it. I said, no, not yet. I kept changing it. And then finally, earlier this year, I read it, and I said, hey, I like that.
Good.
I said, hey, I like that. And when I got to that point where I said, hey, I like it.
Right, yeah.
So then that's when I went in.
Because you're your hardest audience. You're your hardest critic, yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. So you're a self-publisher.
Yes.
Correct? And so the process of self-publishing, for those who don't understand, it's more than simple just write it and then put it up on the computer and have people sell it. What is involved in self-publishing?
Okay, so once you write the manuscript, and it actually is not very difficult. You write the manuscript, you have it edited, and then you make those changes. Is it you edited or
other people who edit it?
You may edit it, or you may have other people to edit it. I like to get feedback from other people.
Right. Well, I agree with you on that, simply because I don't see my typos anymore, because I read it how I thought I wrote it. You know what I mean? So it's like I may spell "to" wrong, the "to" versus "to." You know, one of those things, or spell something completely wrong, and just because I don't see them anymore. After a while, you don't see
After a
your
while
typos.
of looking at it,
Yeah.
right, right,
Yeah.
right. And that's the thing where, I kept having to go back and,
Right.
and look at it and say, hey, no, that's not quite right.
Right.
So, but so once you have your completed manuscript and you have it typeset or put into the whatever format you want,
Right.
whether it's the 6x9 or whichever size you want it to be in terms of a template, and then you decide, which self-publishing platform that you want to use.
Okay, so explain that, the different
Okay,
platforms.
there are different platforms. Amazon.com obviously is one of the most popular. They have about 60% of the market,
Wow.
from what I understand, if I'm remembering correctly. And so I use Amazon for these books. I have used a different one in the past, iUniverse.
Okay.
And in iUniverse, there is an upfront cost involved, and they will take your book, they'll set it, they'll publish it, they will put it out there, they'll market it to some extent, okay, but there are costs involved. Amazon is different in that you only pay for your printing costs. You don't pay for any setup costs or anything like that. You also have to have an ISBN number, which is a number that libraries use to track books, or
Okay.
stores use to track books when they're selling it. So you have to purchase an ISBN number.
Where do you get that at?
Well, you can get it from Bowker. You just Google that online, Bowker, and you can get an BOWKER, and you can order an ISBN number. I believe it's $125.
Yeah.
Or you can get a free ISBN either from Amazon or from Ingram Spark, which is another platform. And Ingram Spark is affiliated with Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
So you can upload your books to Amazon, or you can upload your books to Ingram Spark, or any number of online platforms that provide self-publishing services. I currently use Amazon, but I am going to also use Ingram Spark. Probably within the next 2 weeks, the book should be available on BarnesandNoble.com as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So they don't just necessarily have the physical copy of the books. They also have where you get them on Kindle and Fire, or what?
If you make it available as an ebook,
Yeah, okay.
you can make your book available through Kindle, through Ingram Spark.
Okay.
So Ingram Spark, and the positive thing about Ingram Spark is that so self-publishers generally have an issue getting their books into physical stores, because physical stores want to be able to return the book if they can't sell it.
Right.
So what Ingram Spark has done, which is different from Amazon, is they have set it up so that a writer can make their book available as a return. So so they're the middleman, and they're assuring the store, if for any reason you don't sell it, you may return it.
Right.
And so that's a wonderful thing that has opened up a physical store like Barnes and Noble to self-published authors.
Right. Right. So that helps them out a whole lot, and it also provides them with assurance that and gives you more to get your book out there.
Right.
Now, when you release a book as a self-publisher, you have your own Facebook page. How do you promote it?
Okay, I do promote through social media.
Yeah.
I basically stay with 3 platforms right now. I have a Twitter platform, which is at Aminah Paden.
Yeah.
And then my LinkedIn, which is Aminah Paden.
Right.
Facebook, Aminah Paden.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And then I also have a website, Aminah1.com.
Oh, wow, okay.
So my book trailer is actually on the website. And
Wow.
so, those are some of the ways that I reach out to people. But I find that the best way to meet fans and to meet people is to actually go out to the retail stores, to do the book signings and shake hands and meet. Well, fist bump now, but
Yeah. We'll do elbow bump.
right, elbow.
Yeah, Yeah. Yeah.
But just to meet people and say hello, and I enjoy doing that, and it's just fun meeting people. And then particularly if you run into people who have read your books,
Right.
and they say, oh, I've read this book or I've read
Right.
that book, and it's awesome.
Oh, that is, I bet that. So when you were a little girl, was this something that you inspired to do? Were you up in Chicago in the Windy City thinking, you know, I think I want to be a writer? How did this passion, this love for writing come about?
Well, as a child, I used to read all of the time. I was always reading, always reading, always reading. And
You got to be a good reader to be a good writer. That's why I tell people, you got to be a good reader.
and so I really had a passion for books, even like all kinds of books. I had a passion for books. And then as I grew older, I started getting into writing. I actually have a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern University. And so it started out in that way. And I do a lot of journalistic type work online. And so I started out that way. And then again, as I was inspired by Iyanla Vanzant, who talked about how she got started writing, you know, and how the only difference between us was, well, myself, her and the audience, because it wasn't a personal conversation, but the only difference was that she had written the books that were on her heart. And I believe that everyone probably has a book within them, some story, because everyone has learned something in life, and perhaps they have some story that they want to give to the world. And so I just, you know, and I write for myself, really. You know, I find that sometimes it's therapy.
Oh my goodness, I was getting ready to say that. It is almost therapeutic when you write. It's a release for me. I mean, I write every day, not just for my job when I have to write the notes, but I write every day. I write something every day. Whether it makes sense to me or not, I write something every day. And I do a lot of free writing. I learned that in college, where I could come up with, you know, magic cream, you know, just whatever, words flow, and then things start evolving. I love that. I really do. It is therapeutic.
Under the Sycamine Tree, which is another book that I wrote, it's almost poured out of me. It was just, I was just typed, and it was just coming out. And for me, it kind of helped me to realize I was dealing with some things with my mother passing, and I didn't even know that I was still holding on to the guilt and pain and all of that. And as I'm writing this book, Under the Sycamine Tree, I realized, you know, that that these are things that I need to release, that she wouldn't want me to, you know, as I'm talking, thinking I'm helping other people by writing this book about these things, these thoughts that we have in our mind. I realized that the book is actually helping me.
Yeah.
So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful when you connect in it, because you know, as a writer, if I don't feel it, how am I going to expect you to feel it? You're writing. You're not. I want you to feel what I'm writing. We got, believe it or not, we got less than 2 minutes ago.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I mean we have gone. I told you, and I hope we've hit everything. And I just want to give you this last minute and a half, real quick, to, you know, anything that you want to speak about your book, where people can purchase it, where people can get a hold of Empath 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. Well. The book is compiled. So there are 3 short stories, Empath 1, Empath 2, and Empath 3, and it's compiled into a novel called Empath 3 Spygate.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so anyone can go to Amazon.com and purchase a copy of the book. In a couple of weeks, it will be available on BarnesandNoble.com as well. Hopefully, I'll be able to get it into some local stores, particularly with Barnes & Noble, because I actually spoke with Barnes & Noble New York, and I believe that they're going to put it into their local store. So hopefully we'll get it into some land-based stores, and you'll be able to go to the store and just purchase it.
Oh, awesome. I look forward to checking it out. I really do.
Thank you.
Let's do the elbow bump.
Yes.
Yeah, for the coronavirus. We got to be responsible.
Yes.
Aminah, did I pronounce it right?
Yes, you did. Awesome.
Good. God bless you.
God bless you.
Please continue to write, and
we
look forward to having you on again.
Thank you for having
with another
me.
book. You're welcome. God bless you. We'll catch you next month on The Spot.